And one of them is going to collapse in 2021. And that will start an avalanche out of fiat money and paper money. And the top beneficiary of that will be Bitcoin. That's one of the catalysts for a price appreciation in 2021. But my point is this, Daniela, Bitcoin is a protest against fiat money, central banks, authoritarianism. And the way the protest works is the cypherpunks and everyone involved in Bitcoin, essentially, we made our own money. It's perfect money. It has nothing to do with the state. You've separated for the first time in history, state from money. It's never been done before, ever. And it now it has been finished. It has been completed. It has been figured out, and it's been launched, and it's out there for 10, 11 years, and it's working. And the nation state, as we know it, is going to dissolve. Central banks are going to dissolve, and fiat money is going to go the way of all fiat money has gone over 300 years. Not a single fiat money, paper money scheme has lasted over the past 300 years. They've all gone to zero or lost 99% of their purchase power. So it should be no shock to anyone that the US dollar is going to go to zero. The British pound looks particularly horrible. That's definitely going to go to zero. All the fiat money is going to go to zero. Turns greed into the hardest money ever known in the human history. So the greedy folks, we need the greedy folks. You know, we need people come for the greed, they stay for the revolution. Well, the biggest bubble in the world by far is the bond bubble. So it's in a 300-year, it took 300 years for the bonds in the UK to get this extended and into a bubble. It took over 240 years for the American debt market to get into this bubble. It's so far in a bubble that's gone negative. Interest rates in the sovereign bond market are now actually negative. So that not even Bernie Madoff, got his Ponzi scheme to that level of extremity. So that is by far the biggest bubble in the world is the U.S. bond market and the sovereign debt market. Then you have behind that, I would say, the fiat money currency. The U.S. dollar is in an enormous bubble. You've got a lot of, still some property markets are in a huge bubble. And probably the one asset in the world now that's undervalued, that's not even very close to getting into a valuation that it should be commensurate with the rest of the markets, would be Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the cheapest asset in the world you can buy. As Paul Tudor Jones has said, it's the fastest horse in the race. You've got a lot of bubbles in asset prices that have been fueled by central bank printing. You know, here's the chart of M2 money supply growth, which is growing at 20% a year. Bitcoin price is staying ahead of that M2 growth. It's the only asset that's, so you got true price discovery. That's reflecting true money printing. Gold is not, doesn't have good price discovery in gold because it's been almost 100% financialized. That's why gold is lagging as badly as it is. And it's not a good store of value in this type of money printing. This is also why corporations like MicroStrategy under Michael Saylor has said, look, the real inflation rate is 20% a year. It's not 1.5% a year. It's not 2% a year. That's a government published number that doesn't take into consideration the massive asset valuations that are popping, that are in bubble territory. That is very convenient for those who are doing the printing. You know, is it coincidence that the people who do the printing of the money are the ones that are benefiting the most from the printing of the money? It's demonstrably, provably not a Ponzi scheme. As a matter of fact, it's a reverse Ponzi scheme. In a Ponzi scheme, the base of the Ponzi scheme has to constantly get wider and bigger. The new money has to keep coming in to pay the investors off who have gotten into the Ponzi scheme early. That's a Ponzi scheme, as Charles Ponzi created the Ponzi scheme with his scheme of, I believe it was stamps, and they had a stamp collecting Ponzi scheme, and that's where we get the term from. And we now also look at Bernie Madoff was running a bit of a Ponzi scheme in that he was paying off investor returns with the new money coming in. Now let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually the opposite. Every 4 years, the amount of money that's mined on a daily basis shrinks by 50% in what's called the halving. So we started off with 50 coins per distribution on the mining output per 10 minutes. And then we had a halving down to 25, and then a halving down to 12.5, and a halving down to 6.25. So actually it's a reverse Ponzi scheme. The amount of money that's entering the system is shrinking, not expanding. So that's a very simple point. And anyone who calls it a Ponzi scheme, A, doesn't know what a Ponzi scheme is, and B, has never looked at Bitcoin for more than 5 seconds, or just accepted like a Nouriel Rubini tweet as if that has a meaning. But he's never looked at it either. It's elastic, so that's a problem. Number two, it's unlike gold, it's unconfiscatable. When I was saying Bitcoin, you cannot confiscate Bitcoin. You cannot censor Bitcoin. It's portable, more portable than gold. It's more divisible than gold. So it's on every single key point that you like gold, Bitcoin does a better job. It's hard money and it's a store of value. That's its primary purpose. That's its number one goal. Why is it going up in price? Is because we live in a world of hundreds of trillions and quadrillion of fiat money that is destroying people's lives, destroying economies, creating wealth and income gaps that are creating social unrest, and it feeds malfeasance. Every time the U.S. government makes a stupid mistake, they paper it over by printing more money. Same thing with all these other G20 countries. Since 1971, since we went off the gold standard. If you make a mistake, you make a blunder with your policy, just paper it over with more printed money. By the way, does that create more cantillionaires at the top who then control more of government and the corruption goes wider and the people at the bottom are getting poorer and their purchasing power is weakening? Yes, it does. But tell that to the people who are printing the money and putting it into their pocket. They don't care. Well, a lot of it is actually hard to get to. It's hard to move it. It's sitting in a warehouse, and it's actually difficult to sell gold and silver. This is why it's not great. I've tried to sell it and move it and do a lot of stuff to it, but it's actually not that easy to do.
Why? Do you have it outside the U.S.?
Without going into particulars, Daniela, it's not easy to move, transport, etc. And I have sold some, but it's not an easy asset class to deal with. Okay,
I can get two more in here. I like this one because I'm a culprit of it being part of the media. Okay, Bitcoin, it can melt down, but you can't melt it down. Bitcoins are not shiny, golden, and metallic as media has you believe. Bitcoins are just 32-byte numbers, nothing more than that. And when the market crashes, you can't melt them down or use them as jewelry or for electrical circuits.
Well, you said like 2 or 3 different things there, but I'll try to unpack it as best I can.
It was a long sentence I overheard. But I think the point is it wrong to depict Bitcoin, and like I said, I'm a culprit of it, as this shiny gold object that we show in our B-roll when it's just 32-byte numbers that you can't really do anything with?
No, you should, in your B-roll, you should show Bitcoin as what's called a coin kite, a digital device that holds Bitcoin. It's a company up in Canada. The computational power that runs Bitcoin, running at about 160 quintillion calculations per second, is beyond the reach of any government or any group of governments. So it's achieved escape velocity. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if governments really wanted to, they may have been able to thwart Bitcoin. But now it's too late. It's simply escape velocity has been achieved, and there's nothing any government can do. Number one. Number two, you've got people inside government that are now pro-Bitcoin. So you've got a senator from Wyoming, for example, who is absolutely pro-Bitcoin, who's lobbying for Bitcoin, who wants to change the state of Wyoming to be a Bitcoin state. They've got a Bitcoin bank. And they want to compete with Delaware. They want to compete with other states. So you've got on the senatorial level, Bitcoin is making inroads. You've got people in Congress, in the Senate, who own Bitcoin, who are not going to fight Bitcoin because they would benefit by owning Bitcoin. They love Bitcoin. It's a fifth column working inside the government. So they're not motivated to stop Bitcoin. Number four, what is more likely is that in the next couple of years, the government, the U.S. government, the IRS will come to Bitcoiners and say, hey, Bitcoiners, we'll give you a 90% discount on your taxes if you pay us in Bitcoin. Because the government's going to be woefully underrepresented in Bitcoin, as other countries around the world are racing ahead and they're accumulating Bitcoin and they're mining Bitcoin. So America right now is not even entered the hash war or hash race or Bitcoin race with these other countries. Remember, in the 1960s, America entered the space race to compete with the Soviet Union to get into outer space. And there was that Sputnik moment.